The reason why we start companies is because we can dream and we can have big, grand visions, but sometimes that's actually what hinders us. That was actually my goal for 2025 is to do less. The reason why I call it do less is because it feels kind of cringy to say that, right? Like you should be doing more as a business. By doing less allows you to focus more. That's what I believe.
You're listening to Customer Growth Sessions presented by Intergrowth, where we talk through strategies to help up-and-coming e-commerce businesses bring in more customers. I'm your host, Pat Ahern. Let's jump in.
All right, listeners, welcome back to the latest episode of Customer Growth Sessions. Today, I'm thrilled to have on Josh Parks, the founder over at GhostFit Apparel. Josh, welcome to the podcast.
Pat, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm psyched to jump in. Can you start out by giving us an overview? What is GhostFit?
Yeah, so I started GhostFit back in 2017, and essentially we were a B2C apparel brand. I was big into fitness. My family, that was something that we just did together. And when I was in college playing college football, I wanted to create something I could wear underneath my pads. And so that's what GhostFit originally became. It was an apparel brand for athletes, for gym goers. And as we've evolved, as we'll get into the story, we became a B2B apparel brand, something a bit more unique and more niche-y. And so today, that's kind of what we are, a high-end apparel brand for companies.
And along those lines, if I remember correctly, I think it was around 2020 that you guys started making the shift to more so going B2B route. Can you tell us more, why shift from B2C over to business type focus?
Yeah, so if I'm being completely honest, when I started GhostFit, kind of getting back into my story, I was a freshman at the University of Minnesota in 2015 playing football. After my first year playing there, I ended up stepping away from the game, and I went through a mental health, let's call it, time period in my life, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I was playing Division I football, and then 9 months later, I was working at Pizza Hut. And my life really transformed overnight. And, for me, YouTube and learning and being involved in business, that was always something that I was interested in, but I never actually had a real idea. And so when I saw that I could create a clothing line, something that I was always interested in pursuing, I told myself, okay, I'm going to go after it. What I didn't realize is I didn't know how to acquire customers. And when I started GhostFit, I realized in order to acquire customers from a B2C space, one, you have to have a lot of money because you have to have a lot of inventory. And two, you have to be able to have influencers. That was kind of like that space, in the mid 2010s of influencer marketing. And to me, what I really enjoyed was having conversation and creating product or creating something that was physical. And so as I began GhostFit, I realized what I do really well is connect with business owners because one, I think that I related to them, but two, I was always a curious person. And so as I began to speak with more and more business owners, I realized that there was a problem, right? Is that all these big corporations, especially ones that have brand affinity, when I say brand affinity, just that people understand who those businesses are from, the look of their logo or their name. I realized that they all just kind of use the same products, the same apparel, the same brands. And I was thinking, well, why don't you use your own brand affinity? Why don't you have your own custom merchandise for you and your employees and your customers? And so that's where GhostFit came in, and we wanted to solve that issue by really being that resource for those companies to hire us to create a high-end product so that they could leverage their brand throughout all the apparel that they wear.
I love that. And I love on top of that you went from this, what it sounds like was at the time probably the pinnacle of your career in your life is, D1 football star. All of a sudden, fast forward a couple of months, it sounds like you're in a very different place. It sounds like a big part of this was really almost resetting, stepping back and saying, what is that next project that I want to take on to get just myself into a better headspace? So as you start making this B2B shift, my assumption is that you faced a lot of rejections in the early stages. And I think that's part of B2B sales as a whole is facing a lot of rejections. Maybe starting out, how do you approach that side of rejections, especially in the early stages when you're, let's say sending cold outreach emails, 99% of people are either not responding or sending a rude response in place. How do you stay positive through all that? Let's start out there.
Well, one, was very intentional, right? I understood that this was my first business that I ever started, and it wasn't going to be successful right away. And two, I had the foundation of football. You basically constantly fail in sports, right? Especially in college sports. Even if you do something well, you watch film and your coach says, like, how could you do it better? So for me, it wasn't about, am I going to get rejected? It's how do I grow and get better? I always told myself, I'm like, I don't have to be rich until I'm in my 30s, right? And I started my business when I was 19. So I gave myself 11 years, right, to actually make some real money. And so having the foundation of like not being perfect right away, but rather just figuring out how to become better, that was really my entire approach. Thinking about the space I was in, I was trying to create something that would give me a foundation so that I could live a better life. Like you said, I went from a D1 football player to kind of having everything come from underneath me. My whole goal was, let's build something slowly but efficiently so that over time this is going to be something that can be, that can last and actually create, a net positive in my life. And so that's my entire goal when I started GhostFit.
So let's think back to those really early stages when, and let's actually focus on, let's say, getting the attention of the right types of businesses. What were some of those early failures that you learned about, maybe that you could pass on to guests when they're really trying to get in front of these B2B prospects?
Yeah, one is being intentional. We went after anyone and everyone, which I think for me in my position, that was probably the right move. Just because I didn't know who our target demographic was. Actually, our target demographic was anyone that had money, right? And so I was quickly learning how to sell, how to approach people, how to present our product, how to differentiate ourselves, right? Like all the buzzwords that you hear, like sure they're buzzwords, but they're real. Like that's what people actually want to know that are going to be spending money with you. So I think one, just going out and trying that's one of the biggest things, and then two, just understand like who is the type of person or company that is moving the needle for you, and as you find that, figure out what they enjoy and how you can capture their attention. So for instance, for us, trade shows are big for us because we understand that our buyers, that's where they're going to be. Their high-end buyers are going to be spending a lot of money. So they're not going to be on Instagram. But if your followers are on Instagram, the people that are going to be investing in you, like how do you differentiate yourself on that platform so that you can gain their attention? I feel like business is very simple, right? Like if you were going to sell to your brother or your sister, you would figure out something that they enjoyed and you would get them to listen to you, right? Like we've all done it. You have brothers and sisters, like you know how to garner someone's attention. Now you have to just do it with strangers. So you have to be very practical on how you go about it because people have so much time. But especially if they don't know you, it's going to be very difficult for them to want to give you their time. So how do you make an impact right away?
Brilliant, brilliant. So let's dive into the trade show side of things. It sounds like, at least at the moment, trade shows are really big for getting in front of your prospects, getting to know some of these individuals that might buy from you. What do you find is effective for yourself for helping you to stand out when you go to these trade shows?
The obvious, and that's your booth, right? Having something that's presentable, that sticks out, loud, relatively loud. But then two, you have to be personable. There's types of people that sit in their booth and there's types of people that stand outside their booth and are shaking hands and are giving away free samples and are complimenting people as they walk past. Once again, if people feel good around you and they enjoy your energy, they're probably going to give you the time of day. So that's the first step. But then second step is that you actually have to have something that's beneficial to them. Just because you're nice to people and it's genuine, that doesn't mean that they're going to invest their time and money into you if you don't actually have a product or a service that is going to be beneficial to them. So two, you have to stand on your product or your service, whatever that thing is. And for us, that's apparel. And how the way that we do that is that, one, we have free samples so that people can try it, so that we don't just have to tell them it's great. They can put it on and say, you know what, I know why people enjoy this. And then two, we have samples of different projects that we've done with our past clients. So it's, having the reviews and that physical aspect to it where they put it on and they enjoy it and they love it. And two, they can imagine what their product may look like because you're showing them other samples that you've done in the past. So it's kind of a combination of all of those put together.
Brilliant, brilliant. So let's say whether it's online or whether it's an in-person event like a trade show, you make that first great touch point with a potential prospect or with a prospect, potential client. What's the next steps from there? What are you really hoping to do to stay front of mind and get them to ultimately work with you instead of one of the competitors that's out there?
Yeah, well, you got to figure out what they truly want, right? Like, do they want a free sample? Do they want a mock-up, or do they actually want apparel? Do they want something that's gonna, differentiate them and their competitors? And so it's asking those real questions. And sometimes that seems like the hardest part is you just have to be intentional and ask them, like, what are you guys actually looking for? Some people, want something that they can show to their clients, but they aren't actually going to buy. And some people are going to be direct and they're going to say, you know what, thanks for asking me that question. We actually have a project in the next 3 months. So for me, I'm always looking for real buyers. And the reason why is that, once again, we only have so much time. Like, I don't want to sit here and, shake hands if it's not going to be beneficial. And I know that may come off bad, but like, business is business at the end of the day. And, outside of business, sure, we can be friends, but like, when we're in business, like, there has to be something tangible that we both can get out of it, or else it's just fun, right? But I have employees I have to pay, I have overhead. So to me, it's how do I maximize our time together? And that's by asking those hard questions that are actually easy if you just decide to do it, and get the most out of, the conversations that way.
Can I put you on the spot? This might reveal too much, but what are some of those hard questions that are front of mind? I think of like the acronym BANT, budget, authority, need, timing in the sales process. But what are some of those questions that are either in the back of your mind, or maybe are the questions you ask those prospects directly to give you that initial verification of, hey, this is a great potential opportunity versus pleasant person, but maybe not a relevant opportunity. Let me try and steer away from this conversation as soon as possible. Hey, listeners, if you're terrified about how much your business's revenue comes from Amazon, this is for you. I get it. Amazon's a double-edged sword. It's a really powerful sales channel, but at the same time, become too reliant on Amazon and you put yourself in a dangerous scenario where you're just biding your time until Amazon cannibalizes all your sales and rolls out the Amazon Basics version of your product. I've seen it happen a lot of times. That's ultimately why we help businesses to diversify away from Amazon by building a secondary and then tertiary revenue stream so that if Amazon rolls out the Amazon Basics version of your product, you don't see your sales go down to zero. If you're interested in learning more, book a free strategy session with me at intergrowth.com/CGS. Once again, that's intergrowth.com/CGS.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So understanding GhostFit, we are a higher end custom apparel brand for companies. And I say that to say that you can do corporate apparel, but do you do it, and are you going to spend the amount of money that it probably will cost working with us? And so the lead question I always ask is, tell me about a project that you've done in the past. And very intentional by asking that question first. One, because it doesn't seem or feel salesy, right? It's an open-ended question, so it allows the customer to speak. But two, then I can kind of get a feel for what their expectations are, right? Some people say, you know what, I would love to, customize your guys' products, but I'm only going to order 12 units. Or, we, have one event a year. Like, that's not a customer that we're typically looking for. Typically, it's companies that are ordering multiple times a year, that are ordering hundreds or thousands of pieces at a time. And so getting a feel for what their baseline is now gives me authority. Okay, like, you've done 1,000 pieces before. Well, have you thought about doing this? Have you thought about doing that? How did the employees react to the gift? Was it something that changed the way that they thought about apparel, right? Like, there's so many different opening questions based off of their initial reaction off of, projects that they've done in the past. And then you can kind of feel pain points from their response as well. And so I really should just try to dig into there. And once again, really try to get down to the point of what do they actually need, and are we going to be the solution for them?
So Josh, this is brilliant. I'm curious about the job titles that you find are most effective for you personally to get in touch with. So let's say whether it's working with like a Nike, whether it's working with a little bit smaller of a brand, do you find there are certain job titles that are really effective for you to have conversations with to get deals to the finish line?
Yeah, that's a great question. It seems like it would be black and white, and I'd be lying to you, Pat, if I said it was. Typically, when we look for prospects, we're looking for procurement or HR or head of people. But here's the reality: like it depends on the job and the company, because you may look at marketing, for instance, and the marketing team may say, "Hey, like you should actually reach out to X and Y because those two are the ones that had apparel." So you really never know, but we always try to cast a wide net in a space that we believe that the individuals that are heading the apparel would be. So for us, it's the marketing, HR, head of people. Depending on the company size, it might be the COO. So it really does depend. Once again, we just try to reach out literally to as many people as we possibly can. And if they aren't the right people, once again, ask. Do the simple thing and say, who should I reach out to? 99% of the time, they're going to give you the correct person.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. So on that, I want to talk about the online cold outreach side of things. What medium or mediums have you guys found most effective? Let's say outside of the trade shows, strictly talking online, what mediums have you found really effective for getting in front of these potential prospects?
For us, it's been LinkedIn. Our demographic, they live on LinkedIn. The tough part about LinkedIn, if I'm being honest, is unlike normal social media like Instagram and TikTok, people don't just scroll LinkedIn all day. So the messaging on LinkedIn for us, it has to be, we really have to pinpoint something in terms of how we can help them very quickly. One, because LinkedIn, that's what it's used for, right? It's used for business. So I'm assuming that a lot of people get business inquiries. But two, people don't really stay on that platform all day. But yeah, that's been a very big hit for us in terms of finding real buyers that are intentional about buying something that is going to benefit their brand.
I love it. So can we walk through a tangible example just with a made up company of what that would look like, how you would go about finding that potential need?
Yeah. So I'm going to break this down. And this is for any business owner that wants to reach as many people as possible. I feel like typically a company wouldn't talk about this, but I don't care because there is a plethora of money out there to be made. We actually use a software called PhantomBuster. And essentially what it does is it does outreach for you. And so typically what we would do is we would find, you would research, I want to reach out to, X types of companies with, job positions of this that they make X amount of money, right? So you're really finding your demographic, and let's say you put that into LinkedIn Navigator and there's 10,000 results for that. You would throw that into PhantomBuster, and PhantomBuster would say, hey, what do you want your initial script to be, second, third, fourth? You can add PDFs to it. And so that's the way that we reach out to people. One, because it's just the amount of volume that you can do, but then two, it's actually reaching people that are genuinely, possibly interested in what you have. Now, the reason why I'm willing to share that is because that really isn't the magic. The magic is the follow-up after. Once they respond, what do you do with that? Right. And for us, we send out a ton of free samples because our product speaks for itself. And two, like just responding in general. A lot of people, you may look at their LinkedIn messages and they have 4, 5, 6, 7 dozen messages from people that reply to them, but they never got back. So the real magic is in the follow-up and what you do after that prospect gives you their time of day. But yeah, we do a lot of cold outreach on LinkedIn, and we try to maximize it using other software that will help us.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. So I'm curious if you can weigh in a little bit on some of the big like sales objections you'll hear as you get, let's say, a little bit further down the funnel. So you get to the point where you have a business that's deciding between you and let's say, 3 other vendors that they're considering working with. What are some of the biggest either hesitations or reasons that someone might say no to you or another vendor when you get towards like the finish line?
Great question. The most common is money, which if you've been in sales long enough, you know that money is never an objection, right? It's covering something else. So depending on the client and the circumstance, typically when people say, oh, like that costs too much, either you haven't provided enough value for them or they don't see the actual need for it, or they may not actually be the right person that is making the decision on that. So that's always number one. I think that it always will be because it's a very easy scapegoat. So to any business owner out there or anyone in sales, if someone says money, dig into it and figure out what the real objection is, because once they tell you that, then it'll allow you to hopefully move forward in the sales process.
Can I ask you a follow-up about the money question? Because that's, I mean, you're spot on, and
Definitely.
I hear it in my line of business all the time. I'm curious, what have you found is a really effective way to follow up to that response? You know, because fully agree with you. If they say cost is the issue, there's some other issue at play that they're trying to mask the price point with. But how do you typically approach it from there?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Once again, I wish I could give you like if X happens, do Y, but it really just comes based off of the conversation and the feel. Sometimes you just have an instinct of like, okay, I understand why they're saying money. So like you try to like poke at other areas. Or if I have no understanding, if there's no like feel to why they're saying that, then I'll ask them like, why does this feel too expensive to you? Well, because last time we bought a hoodie, it was only $50 rather than 75, right? So maybe they're too worried that that price increase when they go to their manager, like they're going to say no to that, right? So then you start prying and like, and when I say pry, not in like a bad way, but try to actually figure out what that root problem is. And if you can actually genuinely solve that, then I think that as a business owner or a sales rep, it's like you should do that because you're going to be a benefit to them. But if you can't, and it's a real concern for them, that's something that your business can't solve, well then it is what it is, right? But I think it's very important to understand what the true issue is. And on top of that, if you can actually pinpoint what that true issue is, that's when you gain trust.
So what's objection number two from there?
Objection number two for us, good question. I would honestly say objection number two is that they want to use a brand that has a bigger name, right? That has like from a B2C side, right? Because, and it's interesting why, right? Our main point is, hey, your brand has brand affinity, so you should use your brand with your apparel. Like that is our angle. And I think sometimes that brands don't actually believe that their brand has as much brand affinity as these other apparel brands. And so they say our guests or our customers would rather use X apparel brand because they know about it. And so I think it's almost trying to break down that wall of like saying, hey, like look at what you guys have built. Everyone knows who you are, and like really ingrain into those buyers that you guys have something that people would want to wear, but you have to offer it first before anyone ever does wear it. It's a kind of a cat and mouse game to try to understand, what that real pain point is when they give that objection as well.
Hey, listeners, if you're struggling to profitably acquire new customers, we're here to help. Pat from Intergrowth here. We've been helping e-commerce brands like Brevity, Cierto Tequila, Bella Bridesmaids, and more since 2016 to profitably scale their customer base. If you're interested in learning more, go to intergrowth.com/CGS, and you can schedule a complimentary consultation with me. Once again, that's intergrowth.com/CGS. I was going to say, in hearing these two objections, what really stands out to me is it's very, maybe obvious, but it's very nuanced. It's not like there's a clear cut formula of, oh, here's how you close, $1 million enterprise client deal. It's like really getting a feel for the conversation, being able to know like when is it the right time to kind of poke a little bit versus when is it the right time to back off a little bit. And then just trying to ask the right questions so that you can align with your brand or figure out quickly that you're not the right brand for them to work with.
Exactly. And to me, that's why I love the B2B side. And especially I love the higher price point B2B side because it limits how many companies are going to work with us. The reason why I enjoy that is that it takes time to build these relationships and it takes effort to understand their needs. And not saying that other business models are ineffective, but for me personally, what I enjoy is I enjoy to really solve a real problem for them. And that takes time, that takes effort. And so by limiting our scope, the amount of people that we're going to possibly work with, it gives me more energy to actually focus on these clients. And in turn, hopefully they'll pay you more and more money. But once again, like you said, there's there's not a science to it. I think it's more of an art in understanding what they need, because this year it might be one thing and next year it might be completely different. And so you have to stay on top of that and be cognizant of how businesses ebb and flow.
I love it. I love it. And one closing thought, and the response you gave, this could be the exact same response for this question, but let's say you can step into a time machine, you can talk to 2020 Josh and ultimately impart some piece of wisdom on him before he starts the B2B sales process. What one or two tips would you give your younger self to really help him to, let's say, maybe skip over some of the difficult learning curves that you faced along the way?
Yeah, I would say do less, and not do less in terms of volume, do less in terms of having less levers, right? Like, have one product that you really focus on, have one client that you really focus on, have one path of sales to really focus on, right? I think oftentimes, especially as entrepreneurs, like the reason why we start companies is because we can dream and we can have big, grand visions, but sometimes that's actually what hinders us. That was actually my goal for 2025, is to do less. And the reason why I call it do less is because it feels kind of cringy to say that, right? Like, you should be doing more as a business. And I don't, so for some reason, my mind likes that. But yeah, by doing less allows you to focus more. That's what I believe, and it allows you to be more intentional. And I know that I use the word intentionality a lot, but that's something that me personally, like, I have to fix with myself. That's been a big issue for me. And so that's why I constantly have been repeating it. But it's been something that's allowed me to be more valuable. And when I say valuable, it's just offering something that not everyone else can offer to the extent that I can. And so just understanding that, you have a lot of power within yourself, but if you don't focus that power, well, then you're just going to kind of be average in the abilities that you do have.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Josh, this has been amazing. For listeners that want to check out GhostFit, first of all, where can they go to buy your brand online if they are a corporate brand? Let's start out there.
Yeah, so our website, ghostfitapparel.com, on the top tab, you'll see custom. You can go on there, submit an order on there. On Instagram, it's GhostFit Clothing. My LinkedIn, Josh Parks. I post a lot of business content, but other content just pertaining around customers and employees and ways that you can engage different people. And then obviously updates on their business as well.
Brilliant. Once again, listeners, this is Josh Parks, the founder over at GhostFit Apparel. Josh, thank you for coming on today.
Thanks a lot, Pat. I appreciate it.
Thanks for tuning in to Customer Growth Sessions. If you found it helpful, subscribe and give us a review. It helps us to grow the show. Looking for more SEO guidance on how to grow your business? Contact us at intergrowth.com/estimator or email me directly. You can reach me at pat@intergrowth.com. That's all for today. We'll see you again soon.